Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason. And Blake, I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it, and I still think you're hiding something.
It's just Chinatown, man. It's
It's
just
just
Chinatown.
Chinatown.
We're doing Chinatown. 1974. The movie is in the most famous quote of the entire movie itself. So, what can I say? It's a classic. Jack Nicholson. It's our first Jack Nicholson movie we've done on the podcast, eh?
Yeah, as like the whole thing, because I chose this for the draft last year.
Right. Yeah, 2 years ago now. It's
Oh
been two
wow,
years since we did that draft.
that's a long time. Flies by when you're having fun. But
Yeah.
this movie is super fun, and well, I don't know if I would say fun. It's so
Fun's
good.
Yes, this is considered one of the greatest screenplays of all time. And after watching this one for the first time, like this is actually my first viewing, I gotta agree with that. Like this movie is written so goddamn well. And I
Yeah.
do have maybe a problem here or there with certain things. Like this, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a perfect movie, but no notes about the screenplay.
Yeah, it pulls you in bit by bit until you don't even realize you're fully in it.
Well, and it's a noir or neo-noir type film, right? So it comes from those 40s like detective thriller kind of films, and it kind of fits into that. It even is harkening back to that time period because it's taking place in the 1930s in LA, which is a
Yeah,
really cool setting. And it's a dark movie. Like this is a very dark, gritty movie, and it's about the pits of humanity,
yeah,
honestly. And it doesn't pull punches. And in 2024, that's so refreshing because our movies now have to wrap up like with a perfect bow every time,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Just in researching after watching this, I did see like a quote that was just perfect. It sums up. It brings together the old Hollywood style with new Hollywood like depth and despair.
Yeah. Well, the 1970s are like one of the most pivotal moments in Hollywood history. Like I've been reading a lot of Hollywood history books lately, and the 70s are like after the Hays Code is eliminated and you're allowed to show like basically whatever on screen with the new rating system.
Hmm.
And, all of these directors are coming in and being given all of this money to do whatever they want to just like make real art kind of thing. And so it's after the Hays Code, but it's before the 80s where everything became very corporate
Yeah, yeah,
and very polished and clean. And it's just like this is a really fun time in movie
yeah.
history.
It's referenced as a second golden age sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'll get into the plot a little bit here. Jake Gittes is a private eye, again, 1937, LA. His usual jobs have him snooping out adulterers, and his current target leads him down a watery rabbit hole, if you will. After he successfully completes this job, this high-level city water department official is found dead. He's found drowned during a drought, where he is the lead on the water department. So lots going on there.
There's a lot of public works going on in this film. It's a
Yes.
movie about how water gets from point A to point B and all of the inter courtroom drama about that, except not at all. This movie is way more exciting than that.
Yeah.
It's This is such an interesting film because the entire film is centered around Jake's case and his investigation of this. And from our perspective of the viewer, we see this 100% through Jake's perspective. At times, like the camera is literally behind him, like showing the back of his body, like facing towards the action. And like we're literally seeing the action through him, basically, in scenes like that. Like it's very unique in that sense that everything that we know is when Jake finds out as well about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, what really pulls you in because you don't know so much of what's going on in the same time he doesn't know. And there's just more and more questions to be asked. And he just asks all the right questions. And
Yeah, or the wrong
yeah,
questions a lot of the time too, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's part of the fun of this, right? Is it's a detective story with incomplete information with a detective who's not necessarily the best detective in the world either. Like he's no Batman.
Yeah, yeah. Like the majority of the time, he's just taking pictures of adulterers and making bank, but this one he like gets pulled into something serious, and he at one point he says like I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Moving into characters of people you may know. So Jake Gittes, played by Jack Nicholson, who we've already talked about. Like Jack Nicholson is somebody that I know all of the movies that he did from the 90s into the 2000s. Like I've watched every single one of Jack Nicholson just because for whatever reason, like as a child, like I think it was probably because of the Batman movies, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
as a child seeing him as he's Two-Face, right? He's not the Joker.
he is the Joker.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he's the Joker. Yeah, yeah. Oh, Two-Face is Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, in a
But
separate
no.
movie too.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. Well, okay. It's been a while since I saw those Batman movies, but anyway. So as a child, Jack Nicholson, pretty like important role. Like the Joker performances are always very like
huge.
prominent roles,
Yeah,
and so like from a very young age, I knew who Jack Nicholson was. The Departed's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my probably in my top 10. Honestly, it might even be like number 10. It's like probably my Leonardo DiCaprio favorite movie. It's my favorite Matt Damon movie. I absolutely love that movie.
mm,
And then like he did like The Bucket List, which is like a movie that literally put the bucket list, made that common nomenclature,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, and all of that said, that's like the tail end of like Jack Nicholson's career, like the old man part of his career.
yeah. Like at the point of Chinatown's release, he was massive
Yeah,
already, as
like
far
the
as I know.
biggest, yeah, one of the biggest actors in Hollywood. Like Jack Nicholson has such a strong career period in like the 60s and 70s that it's a massive hole in my filmography. Like
Yeah,
I've seen The Shining, it's one of my favorite movies, like Stanley Kubrick, one of my favorite directors, but other than that, like I really haven't seen a whole lot of young Jack Nicholson movies. So it was really cool to get to experience this one.
yeah. I really enjoyed watching him young, and it's just like when we watched the other Englishman guy.
My cocaine.
Michael Caine. Yes, exactly. So it was awesome and refreshing to see him acting still at his peak, but just an earlier peak than we knew existed almost.
Yeah, right? Like he kind of went strong for like a 30, 40 year period, right?
Yeah.
And so it's funny, it's surreal almost because I know him from the later part of his career, but where I'm connected to this movie and this performance is actually with like stuff like The Simpsons and stuff like that, which just shamelessly like copied this in multiple episodes of the cartoons that we grew up on, right? So like even though I didn't really know this film, like the plot beats and the vibe of this movie are something that I feel automatically connected to.
Yeah, yeah. And his performance was pretty awesome. It was to me like I was watching it, I was like, this is exactly who Leonardo DiCaprio is trying to be.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
Like
Like,
they could have been brothers in 1974 if Leo was transported back in time to the
yeah,
same
for
age.
sure.
I think I like they're almost a mirror, like the way that like his movements and his speech and things like that.
Well, he definitely would have learned some stuff being like on set with him
Of course,
in The
yeah,
Departed, right?
yeah,
So, but anyway, other characters. Hollis Mulwray is the central character that the entire movie's plot centers around. The man who is so famous at this point already in Hollywood for bringing the water to LA, right? Like he's already built dams and built aqueducts before and is a central engineer in all of this happening.
mhm,
And like you said, very early on, winds up dead. And that's really the central plot of what Jake's investigation is throughout the film, is what happened to him.
yeah. And I don't know the actor from anything.
No, I wasn't going to bring him up at all. So, but the next character is definitely an actor that honestly you probably don't know if you don't like watch a lot of older movies, but it's somebody that I think you should know. Like it's one of the most honestly one of the most important actresses of the 60s and 70s, and that's Faye Dunaway playing Evelyn Mulwray, the wife of Hollis Mulwray. She's fantastic. Like she's incredible in everything that I've seen her in. Like she was in Network, Bonnie and Clyde, which is one of the most famous movies of all time, one of the most famous like American stories, American crime stories of all time. Just an incredible performance. Like she's great. Noah Cross is kind of the in the background like big entrepreneur businessman guy
Like
kind of
Kingpin
lurking in the
kind of
shadows.
as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's played by John Huston in Just an incredibly disgusting performance.
Yeah.
He's actually more known as a director from the 40s and 50s. I actually almost picked him as my director way back when, 2 years
Wow.
ago when we did that. Yeah, because he's got some really cool stuff. And I haven't seen any John Huston movies before, but very, very important director of the 40s and 50s era of film. And he was actually like tapped originally to direct this, and he didn't want to direct, and then eventually ended up being in the Noah Cross character. Like I said, it's a performance that I'm never going to forget.
Yeah, and he was an absolute huge actor of the like old Hollywood. So that's where like the old versus new Hollywood kind of gets bridged here as well. When you're watching at that time, like so many people would have known him just as soon as he was on screen. He was in Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I don't know if he was in all of them, all of the old ones.
No, he wasn't. I've seen all the old ones, and they after like the second one, it's kind of new characters, new story,
Yeah,
more or less.
he was
So
also M in Casino Royale.
the original Casino Royale,
Yep.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't seen the original Casino Royale either,
Me
actually.
either. And so like he was in like Moby Dick and like a bunch of other old movies in like the 40s, starting in the 30s, 1929 actually. So again, like he's huge for that time. We just don't know that much about him, but he plays such a pivotal role for this. Like that character adds so much to the story.
Yeah, his role, like his performance, is incredible. Like I said, it's probably my favorite performance
Yeah.
because of how horrifying he is.
Yeah. This isn't spoilers, but it's super interesting. Jack Nicholson was dating his daughter at the time of filming.
Yes, yes, and that's something that we'll talk about in the spoiler full
All right,
discussion
fine.
because of the quote and the time that it takes place and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's not really many other characters that I really want to dive into here. Just a couple of actors that I want to shout out. James Hong being the first one, most recently in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, being Evelyn's father. He's
Oh,
like one of my favorite character actors of Hollywood ever. Like he was in Big Trouble in Little China as well. Did a lot of collaborations with John Carpenter. Massive fan of James Hong. Every time I see James Hong in a movie, I'm like, this movie's gonna bang.
oh
Like
yeah.
James Hong is great. He was the butler in this movie,
Yeah,
so look
yeah.
out for him. Also, like in the opening scene, I was like, wait a second, is that Paulie from the Rocky series? Have you seen all the Rocky movies?
Yeah, I have, but
So Paulie, Adrian's brother, the kind of like weird dude who's friends with
yeah.
Rocky in the whole series. So he's like the guy who in the opening scene has hired Jake to look into his wife cheating on him.
I knew him. Ah,
Yeah.
I
As
meant
soon as
to
I
look
saw
him
him,
up.
I was like, Paulie.
Yeah, like I didn't recognize him for that, but like he's so recognizable, I just didn't place him. Huh.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, no, I knew it instantly. So that's Burt Young, and then Roman Polanski actually makes an appearance, and we need to talk about Roman Polanski because he is the director of this film, but he plays the man with the knife. So that was another moment where I was like, oh, I didn't know Roman Polanski was going to make a cameo in this.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and I did a double take because I wasn't like 100% sure what Roman Polanski looked like in the 70s, but I kind of had a general idea because
Yeah.
of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So, and this is where we have to bring up Roman Polanski here because, as anybody who knows the history of Hollywood, Roman Polanski is kind of a black spot in Hollywood. Like, several years after this movie, he was convicted of raping a 14-year-old girl, and horribly disgusting, like
Yeah.
pretty dark moment in Hollywood history because he eventually actually fled the country because, and this the story of like why he fled and everything, I'm not going to get into too much detail about it, but like it's a very like wild story about the law and the justice system, and like the justice system wasn't going to actually convict him of a whole lot. Like he was just going to do community service, and then the judge on the side was telling people, actually, I'm going to put him away for 50 years and surprise him.
Yeah.
And so it became like this whole big thing. He actually fled the country. He's been living in Paris for years, decades now, kind of evaded justice, and that tarnish has been like hanging over him his whole life. Like, but he's also a dirty scumbag.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing that we kind of have to reconcile right now is like, at this point in Hollywood history, I'm sure people behind the scenes kind of knew what was going on with Roman Polanski, right?
Yeah.
And he also, the reason why he plays such a prominent role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if you've seen that recently, is because he was married to Sharon Tate at the time she was murdered by Charles Manson's gang.
I was gonna say OJ, but just kidding. Wrong time
Jesus.
period.
Yeah. But anyway, so the thing is like at this point in time, like that's not common public knowledge, and there's hundreds of people working on a movie like this, and to not acknowledge a film of this importance, it's one of Jack Nicholson's most important roles. Robert Towne, the screenwriter, it's his most famous screenplay. Like, there's all of these people that, like, to not acknowledge a film like this does a disservice to everybody else who's working on it.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, like, I probably wouldn't honestly do any other films of Polanski's after the time that he's recognized for what he did, because I feel kind of a little bit dirtier covering some of those films where there's a recognition and an acceptance of what he's done, and people are going to work with him around that. So that's probably where I draw the line, but anything before that I feel slightly less dirty covering.
Yeah, like it's always the art versus the artist thing, and
Yeah.
apparently that's just the underlying shit behind Hollywood. And this movie kind of has a place in that because it is discussing something about basically the birth of not exactly Hollywood, but LA. And
It's so ironic in a sense, right? Like
exactly,
it's about the seedy underbelly and like these people who are able to act outside of the law, and who in a sense like the law almost shields them from any sort of justice, right?
yeah.
And we'll talk about it in detail, but like literally the word Chinatown is a metaphor for all of that in this film.
Yeah, the themes are very heavy and politicized and very apt in today's world. We're
Yeah.
still facing the same problems. Probably the biggest reason why this was such an important film in film history is like how important that message is, and it continues to be there. We're still seeing all of these similar stories coming out all the time, and there's just
Yeah,
another
like
one
the Me
after
Too
another.
movement. Yeah, exactly. And then like some things change and some things just, you know, quietly go away, or people get better at hiding stuff. Like it feels like things change but things just stay the same, you know?
Yeah, try and do better each time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, who's this movie for? Does it hold up to a modern watch? This is like one of the most classic neo-noir mystery films forever, but it's not a movie for everyone, I would say. Like, this isn't escapism. This is like
Yeah.
basically turning the camera back on humanity and saying like, this is what really goes on in some of those like back alleys. Or not even back alleys necessarily. This is sometimes what goes on in like these big mansions and
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? Like, and those private islands and all of those kind of things. Like,
Behind the camera.
yeah, exactly. And so this isn't escapism by any means. And so there's just a group of people that are just absolutely not interested in a film that's exploring the darker pits of humanity, right?
Yeah, and like going into it, you wouldn't necessarily know that for the first like while. You wouldn't. It could be a little bit slow for someone who's not
Yeah.
ready to dive into something like that, but it just stacks like little bit on little bit until you're like fully invested. So it's great for that, but someone who needs to get like pushed into
Yeah.
the deep end, like modern movies force you to do, it might not be for you.
Yeah. There's like a methodical pace to this, right? Like,
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's slow necessarily, but it's just like methodically like taking you through the details. Like it's very procedural in a
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And that's partially because of the character that we're centered around, and also partially because we're also centered around one character. So we're only seeing what he's seeing at the time he's seeing it. Like we're not playing with timelines at all, like nothing like that. It's a very straightforward film in that sense, and every detail is really important, except when it's not too, right? Like
yeah,
that's part of the fun of this movie is like being the detective and watching it and trying to figure out whether something actually might be a clue or whether it's trying to throw you off or something like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the fun of watching this. And actually, as like a podcaster watching this, as a film critic watching this, that's actually part of the fun of watching it too, because like I'm already writing down little notes and stuff as I'm watching.
Yeah.
I'm literally like trying to figure out the mystery like while I'm doing the review, basically.
Exactly. So if you love mysteries, this is 100% for you.
Yes. It's one of the classes, one of the best.
Yeah. And in that sense, it also holds up in a modern day watch as long as you're ready to sit down and watch a mystery.
Yeah, a slow burner mystery.
Yeah.
You have to be on board with that. Like, you can't be looking for some big high octane like action type of film. It's just not going to be there for you. Like, it's also the vibe of this movie too, right? Like, it's dark. There's not a lot of like shining moments of victory or anything like that, right? Which for me, like, I'm a big fan of that kind of vibe in my movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just something that like I actively seek out. Like, these kind of movies are some of my favorites of all time. And even just this genre, like, I really appreciate this genre a lot. And so the further back we go and seeing like where this genre comes from and like where it's gone, like, like Blade Runner 2049 even has some small connection to this and like its vibe and like that mystery element to it. And so I really love this genre a lot. Like, this is one of my favorite genres, honestly.
Yeah, like having watched a decent amount of mystery, like detective type movies, this one just like I love the pacing because it's like a straight line graph up to one direction. There's no like ups and downs. It's not like you're not
it's not
riding
like tension,
roller
tension,
coaster.
tension, release, tension, 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 release. It's
Yeah.
like learning. But what I'll say about it though, as well, as we get into the latter half of this film, I don't know if I've had a more physical, like visceral reaction to some of the reveals in this movie.
Yes. Like at the end of it, like your heart's racing and like I
I
I had
honestly am just about
shivers.
ready to throw up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's tense. It's the frog in the boiling pot of water.
Yes.
That describes this movie, I think,
Yeah.
well, especially as it's related to water.
110% agree. One scene to sell the movie. Do you actually have one or no?
There aren't actual clips that I think can give you the feeling that this
Yeah.
gives you. So if you see one clip, it's not going to sell you on it. Like I could probably find a clip where it's like this is Jack Nicholson as a young guy and he's killing it. Like that's all I could show you, but any of the clips would work for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you and I were kind of talking right before we started recording, and that I kind of share the similar opinion of is it's really hard to recommend one scene of this movie to be the selling point because it's a movie where, like you said, it's on a straight line trajectory up in tension, and to catch it at any point, you're not going to feel where the movie's kind of heading in the direction that it's come from and the direction that it's heading towards, right? And so you're also, the other part of this is with a mystery film, I feel like watching a scene partway through the movie, A, slightly confuses you because you don't know all the facts leading up to that moment, but B, also spoils parts of it for you. So for me, like, I have two scenes. I think that the one I'm going to actually talk about is called A Respectable Man, which is the scene where Jake sits down for lunch with Cross to discuss the case that he's doing and that he's working for his daughter and all of that. Like, it doesn't really give away what's going on in the bigger story, but it kind of gives you an image of who each of these characters is and lets you kind of see a little bit what Jake's motivations are, who Jake is as a person, like a little bit of his back history, and like he explains a little bit in that scene like what Chinatown is and what it means to him, and kind of builds that a little bit. But like I said, it's really hard to recommend just one scene in this movie because there's just too much details that I was just lost to seeing one little clip.
Yeah, and I would actually say in that A Respectable Man clip, that is like the scene where it really nailed home. Like that is what Leonardo DiCaprio
DiCaprio.
Leonardo like copied his mannerisms from that scene. I swear to God, like just the way he's sitting and like talking, like you've seen Leo do that 100 times.
That's I think the best scene that we're gonna be able to recommend
Yeah,
for this one.
the only other one I would say is Jake likes his nose, and that's the quote that I said at the very beginning of this, and it was just
Yeah.
like an awesome delivery of that line. He knows there's something going on. He doesn't know exactly what it is, but he's gonna find out.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like very, it's on the nose in a sense, and like that's kind of what it's going for,
Yeah,
right? And like it's yeah, it's like a play on words within a play on words kind of thing is
yeah.
like what he's talking about in that scene.
And like once you've watched the movie and see that clip, you're like, the writing is just so awesome for those little
Hmm.
things.
Yeah, yeah, it's very tightly written screenplay.
Yeah.
So when to watch? I like this on like a Sunday afternoon. Like this is a while it's raining kind of movie. That's kind of the vibe that I like. Like not maybe not necessarily even Sunday afternoon. Like Sunday evening, it's darkening out. Like the
Yeah,
clouds are
yeah.
out. It's raining a little bit. Like that kind of vibe, right? Like because when I picture like a neo noir film or even like a noir film, like I picture the detective's door with like the detective's name, and it's like
Hmm.
raining and thundering a little bit. You know, like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
and so that's kind of the vibe that I want to be in when I'm watching a movie like this.
That's very fair. I could agree with that. I don't think there's a better time, really. Sundays are so great for movies.
They really are. Like I like my big bangers on Saturday nights. I like my genre on Friday nights, but Sundays just you can slot in a lot on a
Yeah,
Sunday.
yeah.
Where to watch? Right now you can rent it anywhere, but you it's not streaming anywhere unfortunately.
I saw it was on Hoopla or something like that,
Oh yeah,
streaming.
okay. Hoopla, yeah, that's the library website where if you have a library card, then in certain regions at certain times you can watch it. So it's a little hit or miss I find with Hoopla. I have tried it out, but I just rented this one on YouTube. It was like $4, and the YouTube version of this one I actually thought was really good. Like it was good quality. I didn't notice any issues with sound or any issues with coloring, anything like that. So I was pretty happy this time with that.
Yeah, yeah. Having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card.
Honestly, Arthur's probably another one where they probably ripped off like one of their episodes probably ripped off Chinatown at some point. I almost
Yeah,
guarantee it.
I bet.
And I think that's it for the spoiler-free discussion. So, yeah, this is a really cool movie for most people, but not everybody in 2024, but I think that this one's worth most people's time,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's a part of movie history. If
Yeah.
you're interested in anything in that area, definitely check this out. It was on my list for a long time, and that's why I chose it when I did my when I we did the draft. And
Yeah.
I was so like I'm so glad that I chose it then, and then rewatching it was pretty fun too.
Yeah, and like I think that I was gonna shout out some like other movies, I guess, before I wrap this up. That if you're really big fans of these kind of movies, that I think you should go back and check this one out. Like the obvious ones are like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, L.A. Confidential, even The Nice Guys of the last 10 years.
Yeah,
Kind of is a play on this, especially because it's an L.A. setting as well in the '70s, which is kind of neat. And then other maybe like I would say less connected, but in the vibe of the film, in the tone of the film, the movie Seven or Silence of the Lambs, like both kind of are hitting and calling back to a movie like this.
yeah, yeah. North by Northwest a little bit too.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's honestly, I would put it into your rotation of classics.
I'm interested because this is my first time viewing, and this is your second time viewing this. I'm really interested to have that discussion in the spoiler full conversation of how you found this as a second time viewing, knowing where the plot was heading and all of the plot beats. And that's part of what to look forward to.
Yeah, we'll get to that next time on Vintage Cinema Rewind.
Toe you down.